Tonight we're in Belfast, and welcome to Question Time. And good evening to you watching at home, good evening to our audience here, and of course to our panel, the Conservative Northern Ireland Secretary, Theresa Villiers, her Labour shadow, Vernon Coaker, the Democratic Unionist Party MP at Westminster, Paisley, the Education Minister in Northern Ireland here, John O Dowd of Sinn Féin, the gay rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, and Maajid Nawaz, a former Islamist radical who now runs an anti-extremist think tank. Amy Robinson has our first question, please.
How is the UK going to protect itself from the style of terror attack seen in Woolwich yesterday?
How is the UK going to protect itself from the style of terror attack seen in Woolwich yesterday? Maajid Nawaz.
Yes, the sad fact is that we're unable to predict such terror attacks. We're unable to stop somebody who has already adopted an ideology of hate from going into their kitchen, as Al-Qaeda has encouraged them to do for many years now, since their operational command has been weakened due to the constant onslaught against their leadership. We're unable to stop somebody going to their kitchen, pulling out a butcher knife and walking on the street and attacking random passers-by. That's the sad state of affairs. And so in dealing with that situation, we can't reasonably expect the security services in this country, the police, to be able to detect every single individual who's hell-bent on engaging in this sort of action. So what do we do? I think there's another option ahead of us, and the answer there lies in a question which I would pose to everyone here, and that is that do we ever wonder why there aren't thousands of young people joining a line to apply for membership to or join organizations that subscribe to Soviet communism today? And the reason why they don't, despite the fact that the same frameworks could be used to interpret foreign policy grievances today that are in front of us by viewing them through the Soviet communist Stalinist lens. The reason why there aren't thousands of young people queuing up to join Soviet communism is because it's no longer fashionable, it's no longer trendy, it's no longer a brand. And so I think the way forward is to make this ideology of Islamism, which is not the same as the religion of Islam, to make it as unfashionable as communism has become today.
Did you join it because it was fashionable?
I joined at 16 years old because of a combination of violent racism on the streets of Essex. I'm talking about hammer attacks, knife attacks.
How many years ago is this that you were?
Oh, not that old. I'm 35 now,
right.
Despite my silver fox look. But at 16, there were two things that I was facing. One was the violent racism on the streets of Essex, and I include in that the institutional racism from Essex police forces. Now, much has changed since then, but this was the days before the Stephen Lawrence murder inquiry and before the Macpherson inquiry concluded that there was indeed institutional racism in the police forces. The second thing was the Bosnia genocide. Now, those two things combined came to a head for our generation, and it meant that the zeitgeist, the trend of our era in the 90s in the UK was to join, if you wanted a form of resistance ideology, you would join the Islamist ideology.
So why wouldn't Afghanistan provide exactly the same basis that you say you were attracted by when you were 16?
Well, it is at the moment.
Same issue.
At the moment, it is, and that's what I'm trying to say. That the way forward, because it's so difficult to predict these attacks when they are as amateurish as this. When somebody goes and gets a meat cleaver and decides to attack someone on the street, it's so difficult to stop or predict. But the way forward is to stop the recruitment flow. Now, how you do that is to make that ideology, what I'm trying to say, is as unfashionable as communism has become today.
Well,
to do that means civil society activism on the grassroots. It means promoting counter-narratives. It means challenging the validity and the credibility of that ideology. It means promoting alternative symbols and leaders. It means promoting alternative narratives.
Majid, that's interesting, but I think the most interesting thing you said was that the reasons that you were attracted, which seem to be paralleled again. And the summary, Theresa Villiers, seems to be that actually there isn't very much you can do about individual acts like this. Do you agree with that? Or do you think there is something government can do?
Of course there is action that government can take and is taking to combat terrorism in all its forms. And I think it's very sad that we're discussing this issue in a place that's suffered so much at the hands of terrorists over the years and worked so hard to move on from that, but where still police officers and prison officers and members of the military face a daily risk from domestic terrorism. But we have a multi-stranded approach to combating the evil people responsible for terrorism. We need to give all the support we possibly can to our police and security services in frustrating and stopping these attacks in their tracks. We need to be utterly vigilant in bringing to justice those responsible, and we also need to combat the poisonous narrative of hate that these terrorists feed off, to demonstrate that our arguments are the strong ones, that we are a vibrant, forward-looking, inclusive democracy, and we will not be deterred or cowed by these kind of attacks. It only serves to unite us in our condemnation of the horrific scenes that we saw on the streets.
Would you like to see the powers that allegedly the Liberal Democrats prevented you imposing to snoop on Skype and Facebook restored as a result of this?
Well, there's an ongoing debate about this piece of draft legislation. It is a very difficult issue.
Presumably it'll be speeded up because of this, will it?
Well, certainly we will continue to talk to our coalition partners. The reality is it's a difficult issue. It's very difficult to ensure that we get the right balance between protecting our security, but also rightly protecting our civil liberties.
David,
we're going to continue that conversation with our coalition.
No, hold on a second. So you're not arguing for what I thought the government was, the Tory part of the coalition was arguing for, which was the ability to tap into Facebook and Skype. You're saying you don't want that?
Don't get me wrong. I'm very supportive of legislation on communications data.
All right, okay.
I think it would help us in combating terrorism, but we've got to make sure we get this issue right.
I have to keep moving, so we've got 6 of us round the table. John O Dowd, British soldiers legitimate targets?
Well, firstly, can I express my deepest sympathies to the family of the young man who lost his life yesterday, which was a terrible, terrible insult. I would view myself as an observer looking in on these matters, and I certainly don't want to see death on the streets of London the way we witnessed yesterday, any more than I want to see it on the streets of Afghanistan or Iraq. There is no justification for what happened yesterday, in my opinion. But I am also conscious that there is 4 suspects currently in custody. They will have to, if they are charged, face a jury trial, and I think we should be very careful in what we say about whether these people or other people may have been connected to an organisation, or this was terrorist related, or whatever the motivations behind these attacks were. In instances such as this, and from the Irish experience we have to learn this, allow the police to do their job, away from media agendas, political agendas, or any other agenda that may be out there. Allow the police to do their job and allow justice to prevail in these circumstances, and that's how you combat many of the issues which your good self referred to, where people do believe that there is a system in place which will allay and deal with their fears, which will ensure that they are treated as equal citizens going forward, and that will detract people from joining some organisation, wherever it may be. But this term of radicalisation, etc., I'm always conscious when looking in on this that we refer to members of the Muslim community being radicalised, or this one being radicalised. We never hear of Christians being radicalised, even though Christians carry out awful deeds.
The question I asked you there, and we're sitting here in Belfast, where over 600 in Northern Ireland, 600 British soldiers were killed, some on the mainland, some here. Do you think, as an act of the people who oppose what the British government is doing in Afghanistan, the killing of a British soldier on the streets of Woolwich is justified in the way that Sinn Féin justified the killing of people here in Northern Ireland?
Well, firstly, Sinn Féin did not justify the killing of people here. And there was a conflict which raged here for 30 years, which Sinn Féin was involved in bringing to an end. We have brought our conflict largely to an end because we entered a peace process. The answer to your question is no, I do not believe it is justified.
Okay.
I do not believe the death of that young man on the streets of London yesterday was justified.
Ian Paisley.
Lee Rigby was a dad. He had a 2-year-old son, and he was brutally and hellishly murdered in front of people on the streets of Woolwich. Utterly condemnable and must be condemned, and I'm glad there's been no equivocation in the condemnation of his brutal and evil murder. I'm glad also that we are discussing this in Belfast tonight, because we do see the parallel. 25 years ago, a short way from here, we would have seen the murder on our television screens of Corporal Howes and Derek Woods, dragged from their car by Republicans and butchered in front of people. I'm glad those days are over here, and I think there's things which we've got to learn. First of all, between 2005 and 2013, the number of terrorist murders in Northern Ireland stands at 6 people. The number of terrorist murders on the mainland presently stands during the same period of time at 57 people and 700 murdered. I did 10 years ago. I would not have believed that I could have said that statistic, that it has turned on its head. And that's a wake-up call to us that we really have moved on in Northern Ireland. And we've got to make sure that we learn from our experience and pass it on to the rest of our citizens in the UK. 3 things we should do. And my friend here at the end of the panel is absolutely right. Respect for the rule of law. We've got to have leadership to say it at every given opportunity. We've got to get people within the community that have been radicalised to say it and to show that they've turned from it. And we've got to give up people within these communities who have been radicalised and bring them to justice.
Let's hear just from some members of our audience. The man in the white shirt, you sir there.
Tracy, you talk about making the argument. Very good arguments. But if I'm a young Palestinian or a young Saudi and I hear these ideas of democracy, then I'm walking down my street and I get hit by a plastic bullet and I think to myself, who's paying for those bullets? Who's paying for that soldier? Saudi Arabia's backed by us, the West. So it's a bit contradictory if I'm in the Middle East trying to look for democracy and my masters are dictated by those in the West. Don't you find your argument a bit contradictory?
Vernon Coaker, do you want to answer that?
Well, I don't think it is contradictory to say that all of us condemn terrorism wherever and whenever it occurs, and there can be no justification for it on the streets of our country. And indeed, that's what the Muslim Council of Britain very quickly came out and condemned it. In this country, in our democracy, if you want to change things, there is a way of doing it. You can protest, and you can legitimately protest, and you can try and bring about change. But I say this, I don't think if there is anyone, I don't think there's hardly anyone at all in our country who would see what happened on the streets of London yesterday, or indeed has been seen sometimes throughout Northern Ireland, and turn around and say in any way, anything that happens anywhere can possibly justify that. We have to stand up and say it is wrong, and we will condemn it. And that is the first thing that you do with any of these outrages. And I know that's what people throughout Northern Ireland and throughout the UK will think as well.
Woman in the third row from the back, yes.
You said that the Muslim Council of Britain came out and condemned the attack. Why did they have to do that? That one person who did that act, it was a horrific act, and I think we can all agree on that. That one person does not represent all Muslims. Exactly. In the same way, when the tragedy happened in Norway a few years ago, all white people didn't have to suddenly apologise for what that white person had done.
So you're saying the Muslim Council should have stayed silent?
No, I'm just saying that there is a bigger problem here that we need to look at. It's not as simple as anybody's making it out to be.
Peter Tatchell.
I think we do have a big problem with Islamism. That is not Islam the religion, but political Islam. People who've turned their version, their hardline interpretation of Islam, into a political movement which seeks to have state power and which to suppress democracy and human rights around the world. And we should remember that globally, the main victims of Islamism are Muslim people. In Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan and elsewhere, the #1 victim of Islamism are fellow Muslims. In terms of the government's response, I don't think the government's response is anywhere near adequate. I think the government pays lip service, but in reality, it does very little to counter the ideas. And I think, in a democracy, countering ideas is the way we will defeat Islamism. Right now, we have in our universities many different Islamist-style organisations who openly recruit, who hold public meetings on the university campuses where they advise and encourage anti-Semitism, the killing of women who have sex outside of marriage, attacks upon gay people. There are people who are hosted by our universities. Some of our universities host gender segregation, where women are forced to sit separately from men. And this is...
At these meetings?
At these meetings, yes.
Yes.
So what I'm saying
what
is...
should happen? You think the universities, the chancellors of the universities should just ban them?
No, I don't think they should tolerate gender segregation. And I think
ban them if they don't.
And I think those who advocate violence should be prohibited. But those who don't advocate violence, I think they need to be challenged. Their ideas need to be challenged. The government needs to be funding and empowering people within the Muslim community who are standing up against these extremists, but who are not getting sufficient support. And I did a proposal with other organisations recently to counter extremism and the way in which anti-Semitism, homophobia and misogyny are the gateway to extremism. That's how it begins. These people don't become jihadists overnight. They start off by imbibing deeply offensive, hostile views towards Jewish people, towards gay people, towards women, and towards fellow Muslims who do not share their hardline interpretation. And if we challenge that kind of ideology at the grassroots, then we will stop them progressing to the next stage, which is to condone the kinds of horrific events we've seen in many parts of the world.
And Maajid, is that an interpretation you'd accept too?
I agree with Peter
Word
100%.
for word,
in
what
fact,
he says.
I think 100% what Peter said is correct. We were involved in the same proposal, attempting
But
to
the
challenge
universities
extremism.
and the role of universities in being wimpish about clamping down on these things, you think that's true?
Well, I think it's not about wimpish. I think there's a level of ignorance out there, and there's also a level of fear about exactly what the
ignorance
difference
about
is.
men and women being segregated before going into a
No,
lecture?
about what the difference is between multiculturalism and respecting different cultures and Islamism, or the politicization of Islam. And I think people need to be empowered to be able to make that distinction.
Okay. The man up there on the right, you say.
Just to pick up on a point that was made about the West or the United Kingdom supporting other nations, I mean, I don't think this is the time for anybody to be trying to score any political points, because this was an absolutely horrific act that happened and was perpetrated by two deranged loners. And can I just say that the Cub Scout leader who stood up to this man is an inspiration, and the best way that we should not doubt our own democracy and rule of law, because then we are playing into the hands of the people that seek to do us harm.
Well, we should always...
Yeah.
I think at times such as this, you should always be in a position to question your democracy and rule of law. You should never deny yourself that right, and that's the most important thing to do, regardless of what action anybody else takes. You have to continually question yourself and challenge yourself to ensure that your democracy is fit for purpose and your rule of law is fit for purpose. In regards tackling extremism of whatever grade, I would be slightly concerned if we start talking about banning meetings, etc. I don't think that is the way forward. But you certainly should challenge those behind those meetings and put alternative ideas to them and force them to explain their ideology against your ideology.
I wasn't saying that meetings should be banned, but I don't think on university campuses of any place they should be allowed to hold meetings where women are forced to step up.
Universities have an equal opportunities policy, and it's about applying that existing policy.
Leave the university a moment. You, sir, over there on the right. And
Yes,
then
during yesterday's attack, one of the guys speaking to the camera mentioned one of his motivations being troops abroad in Afghanistan and other Middle Eastern countries. And you mentioned also being radicalised by the Bosnian genocide and all that sort of stuff. I was just wondering, do you not think that radicalisation is inevitable if the West continues to pursue an aggressive foreign policy?
I actually don't think...
I believe very strongly that there is nothing in UK foreign policy that could possibly justify or excuse this horrific act.
He wasn't saying that. He was saying radicalisation will happen if you have government policies that a group of people strongly oppose.
I'm not nearly...
And is that inevitable?
No, I'm much more optimistic than some of the audience are on this. I think it is possible to persuade people that Islamism of an extreme form is destructive and should be abandoned. There are a range of UK government programmes that we're undertaking, and the crucial thing is to engage with the Muslim community in our efforts to de-radicalise the small number of individuals who espouse these brutal and vile views.
But is that engagement being done?
Is that engagement being done? I fundamentally disagree with this chap's point here. I'll tell you why. Because if you're right, then we have the rule of jungle, not the rule of law. And what we have to get back to is the rule of law. This country has free speech. This country demonstrated yesterday in the response to that crime, restraint by police officers. In the United States of America, in Italy or anywhere else, those chaps who carried it out would not only have been shot, they would have been shot dead. And the police have demonstrated considerable restraint already. And I look forward to them being brought to the courts, put to the courts, held responsible for their crime and made punished for their crime. That's what we need to see, and that'll be the biggest lesson to other perpetrators of crime.
The second row from the back. I think we must then move on, Vernon. I'll just come to you.
Okay.
Yes.
In relation to this murder in Woolwich yesterday, I mean, there are a lot of eloquent expressions coming across here tonight. Indeed, Boris Johnson has said his rousing rhetoric on the matter quite well, in fairness. However, the security forces were allegedly aware of these perpetrators. They were on the radar, to use a quote. Surely the government and the police were caught on the hop, and unfortunately they're going to be caught on the hop again.
Never drop your guard.
Well, I think that clearly when anything ever happens, then the police and the intelligence services look at what has happened, how it has happened, and what they need to do in order to try to prevent it happening again. So you're right to raise that, but at the present time, what we mustn't do is to do anything which impedes the work of the police and intelligence service in trying to see what has actually gone on and see what they need to do in the future. And I think actually at the heart of your question goes back to some of the earlier questions, because actually what we need to try and understand is what it is that leads one or two individuals to turn from hearing radical preachers preaching things that we ourselves would fundamentally disagree with. What moves one or two individuals to move from that to do the wicked and terrible acts that we saw on our streets yesterday? And that's the challenge for the police and the intelligence services. Let me just add one other thing.
When you say that, I mean, Northern Ireland saw exactly that, didn't it? A massive collision of political ambitions and aims which led to violence for many years. You can't be that surprised. You don't have to ask questions about it. It's there, here, in this part of the United Kingdom. You can find out about it.
But what I was saying was that there were, in this instance, the intelligence services, what they need to try and understand is how some people move from attending radical mosques and hearing radical preachings, and one or two move from that and stay within the ambit of the intelligence services and move that to that violence. Let me just add one point that I think is really important. Of course, it's a policing and intelligence service response, but actually it's also the work that goes on in the different communities, working with different organisations, with communities, with individuals, with schools, with universities, to work with them to try and have a better understanding of what's happening. Okay. That's been shown true in Northern Ireland. That will be shown true across the whole of the UK in dealing with this threat as well.
I think we ought to go on. We only have one woman on the panel, so I'll come to you because you're not the only woman in the audience, but you've had your hand up for some time, and then we'll go on to another question.
I would actually like to contradict John O Dowd about radicalism within Christianity. If you look at social media websites, people are very angry indeed, and it only takes continued build-up of that anger to explode into the radicalisation of anybody. So I think you're wrong to say that, because potentially it is there if attacks continue on the country.
Well, the reason I raised that is, and Vernon's comments as well, I think the difficulty, and looking in on this, the difficulty is this: you're only dealing with one part of the equation. You're dealing with those radicalised Muslims. There are attacks in England last night taking place by far-right groups who are largely Christian, if not completely Christian, who are white. How do you deal with their radicalisation? Who radicalised the man who stabbed Mohammed Shalim in Birmingham 3 weeks ago? A 75-year-old man walking home from the mosque stabbed him to death. Who radicalised him? So if you don't deal with the entire equation, you're not going to answer the question. And I'm not sitting here condemning Christians, and I'm not sitting here condemning Muslims. But what I'm saying to you is this: in each element of our society, there is people who are on the extreme side of it, and you need to deal with them all, or else you lose the entire situation.
All right, thank you. We'll go on to another question. Just before we do, you can join in the debate tonight by text or by Twitter. As you well know, our hashtag is there on the screen, BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text comments to 83981, and if you push the red button, you'll see what other people are contributing. And if you're listening on BBC 5 Live tonight, welcome, and the debate will carry on BBC 5 Live when we've finished here. Let's go on to another question, and this one comes from Alan Scott, please. Alan Scott?
With Parliament taking steps to introduce same-sex marriage, is it time for the Northern Ireland Assembly to follow suit?
Yes, same-sex marriage, which, yes. Seems to be not quite so popular in the Parliament here as in the Parliament in, well, that's not the Parliament here, the Assembly here. Ian Paisley, you better kick off on this, hadn't you?
Why ever should I? But yes, well, look, I'm unapologetic about this. I take a very traditional view on marriage, and I know that it is probably very unpopular nowadays, and I'll be accused of being a dinosaur and being behind history and all the rest of it. But I believe marriage is fundamentally about children. That's about creating children who in turn create society and create family and create society and create stability in that way. And that's my interpretation that I have of it. Now, I know I would be vilified now for having that view. No doubt I'll be accused of being homophobic. No doubt I'll be accused of being close to being racist. And everything else that is nasty and bad in the world, because it is a traditional Christian view. And the reason why Christians are vilified about this point of view is because we're to be scared off from expressing that point of view. But I will express it proudly and honestly because it's how I feel. It's also how, quite frankly, the majority of my constituents feel. Over the last year and a half, I received a post bag on this particular issue, especially whenever the Prime Minister turned from his position of not having this in his manifesto to suddenly making it a primary party policy for the Parliament. I received something like 3,000 individual contacts from constituents saying to me, you must stand up against this. I received 5 letters of opposition to it. And I must say that whilst that's only a vox pop in my own constituency, I believe I'm in tune with the people who sent me to Parliament to say to government, think again about this. It's divisive. It's divided your own Parliament. It's divided your own party. Indeed, I walked through the lobby with more Conservatives than Theresa was able to walk through the lobby with on this particular point. It is ripping people apart, and we've seen in the last election that the UKIP made significant inroads and have chalked up this divisive policy on that road. I am not opposed to homosexuals. I believe that homosexuals have and are entitled
you say you're pretty repulsed, but you say you're pretty repulsed.
I'm repulsed by many things, but
no,
that is actions, David, as opposed to individuals.
Don't bulldoze me in the Paisley manner.
I would never bulldoze David Dimbleby, who's good at bulldozing everyone else in this panel.
Let me just then, in that case, give you this quote. I am pretty repulsed by gay and lesbianism. I think it's wrong. Daddle-daddle-dum. You can't then say you're not against it.
Well, sorry, the daddle-daddle-dum was the actions which I was talking about, not the specific individuals. I'm repulsed by people who are not homosexual as well on many occasions, and by their actions. And I think, it should be taken in the round, that particular comment.
Immoral, offensive and obnoxious, you say.
But I will...
Is that, do you stand by that?
Well, I'm entitled to those views, yes. I'm entitled to those... I'm entitled to those views, and indeed I will be challenged by them and accused of having all
I'm not challenging you for having the views.
Of opposition.
You just said earlier you weren't against gay relationships, and now it seems as though you probably are.
I've said I'm not against individuals, and I think that I'm entitled to have a position. But I'll tell you this: Parliament has now put this forward. It now goes to the next session of Parliament with regards to the House of Lords. It'll be interesting to see what comes back to us. But Parliament is incredibly divided by it, and I think that we've got to recognise that it wasn't in any manifesto, there was no significant mandate, and I can't for the life of me understand why this particular government has decided to champion it at this particular time. But no doubt it's an unpopular point of view.
Not entirely. Peter Tatchell.
Well, I think the British people have spoken very clearly. All the opinion polls show that, one YouGov poll showed that 71% of the British people believe that gay couples should have the right to marry in civil ceremonies in register offices. And in total, 58% of religious people also agreed that gay people should be able to get married if they wish. And of people intending to vote Conservative at the next election, 57% of would-be Conservative voters support equal marriage too. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any issue in British public life where so many people were in favour. Now, your point, I'm sorry and sad that you've got these intolerant views, but that's your right. That's your right.
Thank you.
But in a democracy, we are all supposed to be equal before the law. I object to the fact that you want to impose your particular religious faith and interpretation of religious faith on the rest of us using the law of the land.
No, I don't.
You're saying that because you believe that homosexuality is wrong or repulsive or obnoxious, that therefore the law should discriminate.
No.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. You can get married tomorrow, Peter. You just can't get married to a man.
Well,
so you're not being stopped. You're a gay man. You're entitled to get married to a woman.
Come on. That's below the belt.
You're entitled to get married. So the law doesn't stop you.
I think most people will see through that. But anyway, the point is, in a democratic society, we should all be equal before the law. And that also includes the right of heterosexual couples to have a civil partnership. And I supported the moves to open up civil partnerships to heterosexual couples. And I'm really sad and disappointed that the government, which claims it's legislating equality for gay people in marriage law, won't support equality for straight people in civil partnership law. That's not consistent.
Okay. The woman in the third row from the back, yes, you.
Just in relation to a few things that Ian Paisley said, when you talk about marriage, the main thing about marriage being about the creation of children, that's a massive slap in the face to any couple who chooses not to have children or can't have children. You're shaking your head, but it is.
Well, do you want me to answer it?
No, just let her make the point. We've got to get round the table.
I think that when you're talking about the issue of equal marriage, that was tearing Parliament apart, tearing parties apart. The real things that tear people apart is whenever our politicians are getting up on a public platform and telling young LGBT men and women, and those who don't define in the binary, that being gay is repulsive and obnoxious and disgusting. Right. And I mean, I feel sorry for you that you have those views. And I mean, the equal marriage bill. No,
you made your point. That's fine. But I want to come back to this Northern Irish issue and the element in it with John O Dowd. What's going on in the Assembly? The Parliament in Westminster has not yet passed it. It's got to go to the House of Lords. What's happening here? And how can Northern Ireland stop something that happens? You go to Manchester and get married and come back here. Are you going to be told that you're not properly married?
Well, if Ian's party gets his way, that will be the case. Now, my party brought forward recently a vote to the Assembly calling for equal marriage. That was defeated on the basis that the system here can work on vetoes. The DUP used their veto in this instance. I think it was the wrong thing to do. We support, and I fully support, the right for a loving couple to get married. That's what this is about. Ian concentrates on the sexual acts and all these sorts of things. Concentrate on the fact that there's a couple in love. Concentrate on the fact that there is a couple in love who want to come together under that marriage banner. And I think we should be supporting them in doing that. And I respect Ian's point of view, and I'm not going to label him with anything. But I would say to him that he is standing in the way of the wishes of a vast majority of people. Right. I get mailbags of letters too from both sides of this argument. I get mailbags from people who are concerned about it for a variety of reasons and people who support it for other reasons. But I'm firmly of the view that if there's two people in love, then allow them to get married, if they so wish.
Maajid.
Yeah. Here. I mean, look. When I was 15 years old, growing up in Essex, as I've mentioned before, look, if somebody came to me and said that the President of America is going to be black, that the most prolific rapper is going to be white, Eminem, and the Conservative Prime Minister is going to legalise gay marriage, I would have laughed you out the room. Now, what does that tell us? What that tells us, Mr. Ian Paisley Jr., is that you're yesterday's news, basically. Because the President of America is black and one of the most prolific rappers in the world is white, the world has turned upside down whether you like it or not, and the Conservative Prime Minister has forced through gay marriage equality. And what you just said in your spiel almost sounded like, I'm not racist, my best friend is black, but... Right? Now you've got the right to your opinion, but it's the equivalent of me, as I used to say, sitting here promoting bigotry, homophobia, anti-Semitism, wanting to kill women because they've had sex before marriage, and saying, these are all my opinions, and I want to lobby law to bring them about. The fact is that they are bigoted opinions. You said you didn't want to say it. I will. They are bigoted opinions. They need to be challenged. You've got the right to speak. You've got the right to say what you want to say, but I have the right to challenge those views.
Absolutely.
I think that what you said to Peter there next to you,
what you said, and I accept your position.
And what you said to Peter next to you there was below the belt, because frankly, you have the right to those opinions. What you don't have is the right to stop somebody else expressing themselves in their own way, so long as they're not harming you, so long as they're not entering your bedroom and forcing you to sleep with a man. Don't force them to sleep with a woman.
All right. I want to... Is there anybody here who would side with Ian Paisley's view, just so we can... Yes, a man up there, because we don't want a one-sided argument.
I don't have hate in my heart. I don't have anger or vilification in my heart. I don't have anything against anyone else. But throughout centuries, the traditional understanding of marriage has intrinsically and inherently been between a man and a woman. That's how I understand it. I don't hate anyone. I don't hate gays. I don't hate blacks. I don't hate Muslims. I'm not angry. But I think you got to understand and I speak on behalf of millions of people, that we understand traditional marriage as between a man and a woman, and to redefine something so fundamental is tantamount to trying to redefine dogs so that that includes cats. Now, don't have a go at me, because I'm not angry against anyone. I'm standing up for what I believe is the traditional way of marriage.
All right.
Can I say?
No, hold on a second. Theresa Villiers, the Conservative Party would once have taken exactly that view.
I'm an ex-swivel-eyed loony, just for the record.
You're what?
I'm an ex or former swivel-eyed loony.
Oh, you are? Right. Okay.
Well, the reason why I voted for equal civil marriage is because I'm a great supporter of marriage as an institution. I think it helps support relationships, it helps keep couples together and support families. And I simply didn't think I could justify denying access to that institution merely on the grounds of someone's sexuality. I believe that I was very struck when I was in Derry, Londonderry just a few weeks ago, where there was a lecture as part of the City of Culture programme, and Sir Ian McKellen gave the lecture. And he just pointed out how over the last 30 years, steadily, bit by bit, the legal discrimination against the gay community has been dismantled. But there is this one last bastion that had yet to be dismantled, and that was the law on marriage. It is a difficult issue. I respect people's views on this. It is, of course, vital that no religion, no church, no faith is compelled to conduct same-sex marriage, but it is a vital step forward in removing any stigma that could be attached to gay relationships, and it sends a strong signal to young people who may be grappling with their sexuality, who may be confused, who may be seeking acceptance, that it is okay to express themselves in whatever the way they want to. And I think it was a good day's work when the House of Commons voted for equal civil marriage.
You sit up there.
We were once told that Northern Ireland was as British as Finchley, but yet Northern Ireland is being left out of this same-sex marriage bill. You know, either we have the same British rights and liberties as the people in Finchley, or not. You know, are we British or are we not?
What's the position that the Assembly won't vote or has voted? Where does it stand?
I understand. Maria Miller made a statement in the House. Maria Miller, the Minister, made a statement in the House that has indicated.
About Northern Ireland.
Yes, but she made it when questioned about Northern Ireland, that a marriage in England, a same-sex marriage in England, when those people, if they were to move to Northern Ireland, it would be recognised in law only as a civil partnership.
Well, what's the difference anyway? Because we were always told it was only a matter of words.
Well, there is a difference, and it's obviously a case of equality when campaigners are campaigning for the right to be married, and it is in case of a civil marriage, but no one is talking about imposing this upon any of the churches. The current position...
No, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about if you're married... No, hold on a second. If you're married as a gay couple, you're married in England, and you come over to Northern Ireland, and suddenly it's a civil partnership, not a marriage. What exactly does that mean? In what sense is it different? Sorry, what does it mean?
Well, it's in relation to, if you want it in terms of the legal definition, it's in relation to inheritance and
no, because inheritance is there in the civil partnership.
There is
inheritance rights are there.
No, it's
tax
not.
breaks.
I
don't think any of you know. I don't think anybody's explained this.
David, I think you actually need to ask Maria Miller, because it's Conservative Party policy, because they introduced it on Tuesday night.
If it doesn't matter, then you'd hope that Northern Ireland would accept it, but I think people should be able to choose. If same-sex marriage is available to couples in England and in Wales and in Scotland, then it should be available to people in Northern Ireland. And what I'd say to the Northern Ireland executive is to think again and to actually allow that to happen. This is about love. It's about equality before the law, and people in Northern Ireland should have the same rights as everybody else across the rest of the UK, and that's what I want to see happen.
Okay. You sit down here, and I come to you, Peter. Yes.
You're saying it's about love, and you're saying it's about equality. But how can you have something that's defined as a same-sex marriage? How do you define that when right at the start the definition of it doesn't add up? It's not equal. And Ian Paisley Jr. actually made a point that you have a male and a female. Male and male is not equal to male and female. That just does not add up. You're saying about love. You can commit adultery with a woman because you love her. It doesn't make it right. And the problem when you boil it all down to this, it becomes a moral issue. It becomes a moral issue. And you're talking about what churches say or what churches should do. The problem with the churches, and it's interesting that when you read in the bill some of the legislation that's coming forward about how churches should deal with this, part of the problem there is you're not going to get churches to step into something where their creed, where their doctrines say so clearly that that's not what you do.
Okay,
so when you're talking about equality, you
Sorry.
cannot have equality simply because of the definition of same-sex marriage compared with heterosexual marriage.
Can I just remind everybody that the main marriage law in this country, the 1949 Marriage Act, does not stipulate that marriage partners have to be male and female. The ban on same-sex marriage was only introduced in this country in 1971. Up until that time, there was no legal impediment to people of the same sex getting married. So this discrimination is relatively recent in our history. Marriage has evolved. Centuries ago, it used to involve child brides and polygamy. Until recently, rape was legal in marriage. A man could rape his wife. Marriage has evolved, and this is part of the evolution. The final point I want to put to Ian is, are you telling me that you've looked your own DUP gay members in the face, your own gay DUP members who are in same-sex relationships, and you've told them that you would not countenance them having same equal rights? Have you actually told them that?
Well, what I have said to them is that I do believe that there is equality, but I believe that the law should be like this. They, of course, are entitled to disagree with me. And that is the beauty of this democracy. And if I'm wrong in this issue, Parliament will vote that way. And if I'm right in that issue, well, it's my conscience that I have to be answerable for.
Okay. When did you say these same-sex marriages were taking place? Until when?
No, that they weren't taking place. There was no legal impediment.
So until when?
Until 1971, with the nullity of marriage.
Why did nobody take advantage of it in the 60s?
Well, they tried, and that's why the law was introduced.
The law was changed.
They did try?
Yes.
Many cases?
Not many, but a few cases.
There was a trial at Westminster.
The man up there, at the very back.
Well, 2 points. First of all, you can't use tradition as a sole justification for anything. Slavery was a tradition for many thousands of years.
See, this is the vilification.
We've moved beyond that. Second of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Paisley, what aspect of allowing gay people to get married and enjoy the same legal privileges as anyone else who wants to get married, what aspect of that prevents you or anyone else practicing traditional marriage?
Okay, just briefly answer that point. Well, so maybe you think it does.
See, this is the vilification. If you have this point of view, you have to be scared off from actually making the point of view that I'm for the interpretation of traditional marriage between a man. I'm answering it, between a man and a woman. And that's what I believe in, and that's what I think marriage should be. And if you want to call your same-sex relationship something else, do, but don't call it marriage, because it's a con trick. But why can't it's not what it is. Get a new word. Invent a new word for it. Call it what you want, but don't call it marriage. Don't pretend it's something that it's not.
The question
because it's
I
not
asked
a marriage.
was, what about...
It's not a marriage of a man and a woman.
He was asking whether you feel threatened as a married person by other people getting married of the same sex.
The question was, what aspect of allowing gay people to get married prevents you or anyone else from practicing marriage in its traditional sense?
It's not a question of me being threatened.
That's
not the point I've made.
But that's not the point I've made. Doing that?
Do I look like a guy under threat, mate?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. We'll go around in circles here. I'll take one more point from the man there in the pink shirt. You, sir, respectable. Very briefly, if you would.
Just to go back to the British Finchley comment that was made there earlier on, I think there's the position that is taken by Ian Paisley and other unionist politicians on this is quite hypocritical. We see it in relation to gay marriage, we see it in relation to other things like abortion legislation as well. They're happy to go on about how much they value their British citizenship and Northern Ireland's place in the Union, right up until the point where that clashes with their own personal prejudices, right up to the point where somebody here tries to exercise a right that is available to somebody across the water, and then the mask slips. Then you see that people like Ian are British when it suits them and they're Ulstermen when it doesn't.
All right.
The subtext of those who are opposed to same-sex marriage is that they don't believe gay people are fit and worthy, and that's profoundly and deeply offensive.
We'll move on. A question from Aubrey Calderwood, please.
Is the Republic of Ireland a safe haven for international corporate tax avoidance?
Is the Republic of Ireland a safe haven for international corporate tax avoidance? John O Dowd.
Well, listening to the events happening in the Senate and indeed information that's coming towards Europe, then it's up to the Irish government to answer that question. If Apple is right that they have a special arrangement with the Irish government to pay 2% corporation tax, then I think that is scandalous. The ordinary citizens in the Republic are under severe pressure from austerity cuts, which are meaning that many people their life standards are crumbling before them. They're losing their homes, they're losing all their worldly possessions, and indeed they're losing hope, which is the most devastating impact of this. So I think the Irish government have a lot of questions to ask in relation to this, but there's also a question for the international community and for the European Commission and indeed and hopefully the G8 when they come to these shores in the next number of weeks will tackle this question as well. If corporations can set up shadow companies or ghost companies to simply funnel through billions of dollars, I think in one instance they're alleging that $30 billion went through an offshoot of one of the Apple companies through the Republic, I think that is disgraceful.
But would you like
large
to see
corporations should be paying their tax.
But you want to see Northern Ireland become a tax haven?
No, we want to see corporation tax here lowered to the same rate.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make it a tax haven.
It makes a tax haven compared with the rest of the UK.
The corporation tax in the south is 12%.
Yeah.
Apple are alleging that they have a special arrangement with the Irish government of a 2%. Indeed, some are suggesting 0.5%. So that is not the arrangement. We want to see corporations coming here paying a fair share of tax, but paying the tax which is set publicly, which is set through legislation.
But you want a lower tax rate than the rest of the United Kingdom, correct?
Well, from my point of view, I want to set up an economy here separate to United Kingdom and partnership with United Kingdom.
United with Dublin, and therefore you could have keep.
No, because it's totally unfair what has been alleged to happen in these circumstances. Ordinary citizens in the south of Ireland are being nailed over tax. They are losing their homes, they're losing their worldly possessions, and as I said, the worst thing they're losing hope for the future. While multinational corporations are using it as a base to funnel through billions upon billions of pounds and dollars, whatever currency they're operating in at the time, and that is not right, it is not proper, and it should be brought to an end. But it has to be an international measure to bring it to an end.
Theresa Villiers.
I don't think the problem is the rate of corporation tax in the Republic of Ireland. The problem is how big business is gaming the system to aggressively avoid paying their fair share of taxes. Now, the UK government is absolutely committed to a competitive tax system. We are reducing corporation tax, but we want to make sure that big business actually pay their fair share. And that's why David Cameron is putting it firmly and squarely on the agenda for the G8, because that is the only way we will deal with this problem if we act internationally together to crack down on this aggressive avoidance.
And change the law.
We will need to change
the tax rules, because they're only obeying the law, aren't they? I mean, Google say, we're doing, you make the rules, we obey them. And if we can get away with this amount of tax, so be it.
Yes, I agree. We do need to change the law, but if we do it unilaterally, it won't be effective. So we need to.
I thought David Cameron said he would do it unilaterally if it wasn't done.
If we do it unilaterally, though, it's going to be much more effective to do it internationally. It's very difficult to deal with the problem completely if you do it on a unilateral basis.
Well, I think you would first of all try to do it internationally, but I think any government worth its salt, seeing the way in which big companies, big corporations are aggressively avoiding paying their fair share means that any government should stand up and say we're not having that at all. It's not fair. Companies are making billions of pounds worth of profit in the UK and rerouting that into other countries. I tell you, in my own constituency and throughout the land, you see sometimes people pursued by HMRC for a few pounds. They're threatened with court, they're threatened with action. And then we see big corporations acting according to a completely different set of a moral code. And I think people think it's unacceptable, they want something done about it. And I think what we should see at the G8 and at the European level is action at an international level to actually say to companies, enough is enough, you pay the fair share of tax, stop trying to avoid it. And I think if we did that, people would accept it. But let me say this, if the G8 or others can't do it, then government should take action on their own.
Well,
it's unacceptable.
Let's just do that. I said it was David Cameron. It wasn't. It was Ed Miliband, of course, who said that he would take unilateral action. What possible action could a Labour government take to get tax from Google, who are operating in Dublin? Well, I mean, it's just sort of hot air.
I'll make this prediction. With Ed Miliband saying what he said at Google, which I thought was very brave and the right thing to do, to go there and say to Google, what you've done is unacceptable, what you've done is wrong, and to say that the British, the government, the UK government will actually look at what rules it will introduce. I make this prediction. You will see lots of big companies paying more tax because the morality of it will affect them, customers will put pressure on them, and as well as changing the law, it will change the climate within, within which they operate. It's not good enough and it's got to change, and I think we should see that done as soon as possible, and I think that's what people think right across the board with that.
Okay. Peter Tatchell.
What we're talking about is a global problem. The Tax Justice Network estimates that somewhere between 21 and 32 trillion US dollars is hidden in tax havens. 21 to 32 trillion US dollars hidden in tax havens, which governments have allowed corporations and individuals to use and exploit. Christian Aid did a report which suggested that every year a minimum of 160 billion US dollars is lost in pricing transfer trickery and falsified accounts. Just in those two mechanisms alone, 160 billion US dollars a year lost in tax revenue worldwide. So we do need government action at an international level. And I don't see it from the G8, the G20, the IMF, the World Bank. I don't see them taking the initiative. And I think that's what we need. We need those big institutions to take a stand and not to constantly be blackmailed by big business, because that's what big business does. Big business says, if you don't give us what we want, we'll close down the plant and we'll move abroad. That is a form of economic blackmail. These people are damaging our country and every country, and we need to call them out. If they truly love this country, and indeed every country where they reside, if they truly love their country, they should pay their fair share of tax. And it's in their own self-interest, because if the world economy goes bottom up, they will lose much more than the extra tax they're going to pay.
But the world economy go bottom up because they're not paying enough tax?
Well,
I mean, this should and would, you know. They should pay tax, but why should they?
Well, they
why
should pay
they if they're not forced to?
Well,
and they can't all lose customers because people have still got to buy things.
I'm saying the politicians have got to force them to it. And Google is right.
But Dublin will still be saying, look, we can get all this business here, and we don't, won't they?
But Dublin has said, and what we're arguing is that there should be a 12% corporation tax.
Yeah,
right? But what has been alleged in the Senate is that there is a special arrangement between the Dublin government and a number of major corporations to pay less. That is totally unjust and totally unfair.
No, look, what we're hearing, quite frankly, is cloud cuckoo economics. These companies, whether we like it or not, are obeying the law. They're residing and they're getting tax advice. The best place to reside, your business, is in this instance in the Republic of Ireland. If the tax regime is changed there to attack them, they will move to Hong Kong where it's 10%. If it's changed there, they might move to Canada where it's something else. So we do need an international agreement where people will obey the law. And the best way for us to do it as a nation, I'm talking about us, Northern Ireland, us, the United Kingdom, is reduce our corporation tax below the Republic of Ireland to 10%, and your take-up of tax will actually increase, and we will have more money then to spend on the British public. So we need a tax efficiency policy, and this, frankly, is something which your government failed to do, and it's something which the current government is failing to do, and we should address it and address it
What was the rate you want, 10%?
Well, I would like it to be a 10%.
Is that fair to the rest of the UK?
No, for the whole of the UK.
Oh, for the whole of the UK, right. Maajid.
I just think that we've got Google, Amazon, Apple, Starbucks. I mean, these are big American companies, the Queen, and we just wonder, who pays his taxes and who doesn't pay their taxes. And I think that when you've got these companies that are acting within the law, then what needs to happen, as Nick Clegg said to Eric Schmidt, and as Ed Miliband said to Eric Schmidt, and as Eric Schmidt conceded that if the law was changed, they would regulate their behaviour, because he said it doesn't make sense to him. So you've got the CEO of Google saying that this doesn't make sense. The tax laws as they stand are antiquated and out of date. So there must be reform. We need to make reform. Of course, that must be coupled with efforts internationally. But I've got to say that if we start reducing corporation tax rates in the UK on the assumption that we're not competitive and that we're judging competitiveness with only the economic value that comes from it, what we're doing is underestimating what the United Kingdom provides provides to the market. Companies may want to move to Hong Kong, but I doubt that Hong Kong has the level of people that are proficient in the English language that the United Kingdom has, and the many other skills and the access to the European Union and the strategic positioning and the history of the United Kingdom are other assets that this country has beyond just its corporation tax rate.
Okay. Man up there with the spectacles on. Yes, sir. No, you with the spectacles, yes, not the one with the beard. Yeah.
I take the point about it being an international issue, but at the same time, the UK government needs to be asking questions of institutions it has control over. We bailed out a set of very large banks in London, and I think the UK government has to be asking questions as to whether we bailed them out just to help large companies avoid tax.
Okay, and I'll come to you and you. You, sir, first, and then to you.
Surely the only reason why there's no scandal of this tax avoidance here in Northern Ireland is because we don't have a lot of big business. Surely that's the real scandal. The fact that we just have this dearth of industry that's left us below the UK.
That's why we
and
need to
below
address the
Ireland.
tax rate. Yeah. Get those businesses in here.
And you, sir.
It's interesting you would mention the corporation tax being 12%. I mean, these instances of Google and Apple are special deals that are going on that people wouldn't know about. And it's interesting, Eric Smith's response to Ed Miliband was, and it was supposed to be less than 1% was the accusation. He says, well, we do want to pay tax, but he also said, but we have to draw the line somewhere. Is it going to be twice the amount, 3 times the amount, or 4 times the amount? Well, even the top 4 times the amount of less than 1% could be just 3%, which is actually only 1/10 of what the standard sort of tax that a normal working person would pay. So, I mean, they need to get a reality check, Eric Schmidt and Tim Cooks. And
I agree with much of what you've just said, and I think the key thing is that people just didn't know that much of this was going on. And I honestly think that one of the biggest things we can do is to make this much more transparent so people can see what's actually going on with the companies and the big corporations in terms of the amount that they're getting in profit and then the amount that they're paying in tax and how they're actually arriving at that amount. I think people have been genuinely shocked.
What a Labour government failed to spot.
By the fact that actually, if you look at it, the last Labour government introduced a number of things about transparency, a number of things about disclosure to Companies House. Right. But what I'm saying is that it'll be, if we shine a light on this practice, I think you'll get those big corporations to change, because I think it's immoral in terms of what some of the things they've been doing.
All right, we've come to the end, but I just want to hear from Frank Allen, who had a question that I like very much. We won't be able to discuss it, but Frank Allen, could we just hear your question?
When will the recession end and get us back to the good old days?
I just wanted to ask you what the good old days were, in your view.
Well, in my day it was always good.
That's worth going back to.
OK, well, we have to stop there, I'm afraid, because our time's up. We're going to be in London next week. We have Alan Johnson for Labour, Diane James for UKIP, and Julian Fellows, the creator of Downton Abbey, among those on the panel. And the week after that, we're going to be in Blackburn. So if you'd like to come to Blackburn in a fortnight, or London next week, apply via our website, which is the simplest way of doing it, or call 0330 123 99 88. For those of you who have been listening to this on 5 Live, I hope you've enjoyed it. You can call in and continue the debate with Question Time Extra Time on 5 Live, presented by Stephen Nolan and John Pienaar. Thank you.
Why? Character. Stephen Nolan is
It's the Nolan that they're...
He's actually hit it more than me.
He is called Steve Nolan.
Yes, he is, yeah.
He can't help it.
No, that's not... I don't think that's what people are laughing at.
Just everyone knows him well.
Everyone knows him very well.
So. Oh, right. Oh, he's big over here.
He is.
Well, he's big over here.
He's certainly big.
Well, he's big over there, too. and he's on 5 Live tonight. So.
And you'll be on Twitter soon.
Anyway, my thanks to the panel here and to all of you who came here. To Belfast, take part in this edition of Question Time. Until next Thursday. Good night.
The film, next on BBC One, stars Liam Neeson, a marriage that isn't all it appears to be, thanks to the other man.